So just wait a second and the meeting will start any moment. Okay, so thank you everybody. Welcome to the meeting of the SRS Joint Committee. Please could I remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded via the internet, and the recording will be archived for future viewing. Please could all participants mute themselves when not speaking, and please ensure that all debate is raised verbally. So can I hand over to Councillor Diath, who will be chairing today's meeting. Councillor Diath.
Thank you ever so much. Item 1 is apologies for absence. We've received apologies from Councillor Goode and Councillor Michael from Cardiff. Are there any other apologies, please? I think that
should be it, Chair. That's it.
I think that's a no. Okay, great stuff. Item 2 are minutes of the annual meeting held on the 21st of June 2023. Can we agree that they're a fair and accurate record? That's agreed, colleagues. Great stuff. Thank you, Ruba. And item 3 are to receive any declarations of interest colleagues may have. And I think that's a no. Okay, great stuff. On to item 4, shared regulatory services, Audit Wales 2003 audit plan. And I believe Steve is taking us through the first report. Over to you, Steve.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And good morning. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm here from Audit Wales. For those of you who may not know who I am, I'm the audit manager for the Vale of Glamorgan Council, and by virtue of that, I'm also the audit manager for the audit of the SRS accounts, being as the Vale is the host body of the SRS. And I'm here this morning, as you're probably well aware, to present our annual audit plan for the annual accounts audit for 22-23. So I'll take you through the main areas of the report. I'm very happy to take any questions, etc. you might have, or any comments you have on the plan. But in summary, the plan really sets out our programme of work for the year, setting out what we identify as the key risks in terms of the audit of this year, the timetable of the audit, the audit fee estimate, and also our audit team. But I'll go through each of those areas in turn, and as I say, very happy to take any questions you might have. If I just jump to page 8 of the report, there's a bit of a preamble there, but if there's any questions there, very happy to answer those. But page 8 sets out our materiality levels. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know this, if not all of you, but just as a reminder, really, the materiality level is really the threshold by which we consider your accounts, the SRS's accounts, to be true and fair. So it governs and dictates much of our audit work. It's also worth noting we apply a much lower materiality level to certain areas of the account that we deem to be more sensitive to the reader of the accounts. And there's 2 areas of the accounts here which are applicable. One is senior officer pay, and the other one then is also the related party transaction disclosures. That's all I plan to say about materiality. So jumping on to pages 9 and 10. These 2 pages really set out the key risks we've identified from our planning work, which we've completed, and hence been in a position to produce this report to present to you today. And whilst we audit, I'm sure you understand, the entirety of the accounts in many respects, again being driven by that level of materiality. So we audit the income, the expenditure, and all the other various disclosure notes within the accounts. What we set out here are those areas of risk, those areas that we deem either more sensitive or more prone to material error. So in effect, we pay much more particular attention to these 3 areas which are set out in the plan. The first of which is the risk of management override. Now, this risk isn't unique to the SRS. It features in all audit plans. It's driven by auditing standards. We've got to, as external auditors, consider the risk of deliberate manipulation of the accounts. So, as I say, it's not unique to the SRS, but nevertheless, we've still got to consider this risk and develop audit procedures to make sure that we satisfy there aren't any there isn't any manipulation of the accounts. The second area relates to related parties and senior officer pay. Now, you'd remember what I was saying about materiality. And because we have a much lower level of materiality, there is a risk, an inherent risk of of a material error being identified by virtue of the fact that our threshold of materiality is much lower for these two areas. And the third area there is in regard to pension fund valuations. You will know that the SRS is an admitted member of the Cardiff and Vale Pension Fund, and there's a number of entries within the accounts, which are based on a whole raft of estimates and actuarial assumptions. Now, we need to obtain assurance upon the reasonableness and accuracy of those assumptions and estimates for the SRS, and the various accounting entries within the accounts are based on a reasonable basis. If I just skip forward then to page 12, this sets out the audit timetable. Some audit work has commenced on the audit. We haven't made a huge inroad into the audit quite yet, but we have started. And it's probably worth me flagging there's no issues to report yet at this stage of our audit work. I'm sure that'd be some assurance to you and some comfort. There's still a way to go though, but we are on track to complete the audit by the end of November, which is the timeline we're working towards. Page 14 sets out our estimated audit fee. You will, I'm absolutely sure, no doubt recognise the increase in the audit fee for this year. But if I set out why that's the case, there's three factors really at play here. The first of which is that, if I can put it as plain as I can, really, our previous audit fee has been too low. The SRS is a relatively new body, formed in, I think we first audited the accounts in 15, 16 maybe.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And historically, we've set that fee too low, and the cost of delivering the audit, as I think year after year, to be honest, I've been involved from day one, has exceeded the fee. So, and we've absorbed that cost in the majority of cases anyway within Audit Wales. So we've taken the opportunity to reset that baseline fee. I should add it's an estimated fee, which I'll explain a little bit about in a moment. But so it is key to bear that in mind. It is an estimated fee. So that's the first factor. The second factor is ISA 315. This is a new auditing standard, and it's applying across all our audits and across all audits across the UK, be that in the private sector or public sector. And that's generating a lot more audit work. So there's been a general uplift in fees across the whole audit sector, and we're not immune to that within Audit Wales. And ISA 315 is requiring a far more sort of detailed risk assessment of accounts and our audit approach, and our audit approach has required a huge sort of fundamental reset almost in terms of how we approach an audit. Now there's costs associated with that, and we've estimated roughly as about a 11% increase. Obviously it's an estimate, 10.8 sounds very precise, but that's the estimated impact, and that's had an impact then on the fee. And the third factor then is just plain the inflationary factors. And we've applied an inflation factor of 4.8%, which I'm sure you'd recognise is quite a bit below the inflation rate anyway. But all three factors have then sort of contributed, if you like, and resulted in a fee increase for this year. But as I said, it is an estimated fee. And if the actual fee is lower than that, we'd only charge the actual fee. We're duty bound under the Public Audit Wales Act to charge no more than the cost of our audit work. So, as I say, it's an estimated fee, and going forward, obviously there's no guarantees. There's an opportunity for us to review the fee going forward, and it doesn't necessarily mean this is, the fee in future years. Much depends on the cost of the audit and how, and the risk assessment we undertake in terms of the level of audit work we're required to undertake. I'm happy to take any questions on the fee, but before I do, I just set out the bottom of page 14, sets out the audit team. And I'm really pleased to say we got really good continuity from last year and over the last couple of years, in fact. And the same key members of the audit team were on the audit. I've been on the audit for the last couple of years, which I think is good news and enables to continue the good working relationship we have with the Vale in terms of working through the audit. But I'll stop there. There's other content in the plan as well, which you might want to comment on or ask any questions. But very happy to take any questions you might have on the document.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. Do any members have any questions they'd like to ask? Could I ask you, Steve, if it's all right, are there any particular peculiarities of auditing a joint service spread across 3 councils, or is it just pretty much the same as, you know, doing it to a single county service?
There's not a great difference, to be honest, because you know you still got to follow the local government code. If I was auditing Cardiff Council or RCT or Bridgend or the Vale, whatever council it might be, all bodies, including the joint committees, follow the local the CIPFA code. So that isn't the difference. Where it gets slightly different is there's various contributions due from the various member bodies, and sometimes there's contributions back, like a refund or what, you know, there's a redistribution, isn't it? If there's it's not a profit, but you know, a surplus is achieved. So you know, some of that can form a very minor complication, but in answer to your question, fundamentally, it's pretty much the same.
Okay, great stuff.
Yeah.
Unless there are any other questions for Steve. No? Well, Steve, thank you ever so much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. If it's okay, could I stay for the next agenda item or so, and then I may not continue my attendance for the whole meeting. Is that
with
okay
pleasure,
with yourself?
Steve? Absolutely,
Yeah, okay.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you ever so much. So on to item 5.
Sorry, Chair, can I just interject there? As a committee, are you happy to note the report of Steve Wyndham?
Yeah, yes. So yes, absolutely. Is that agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Right, on to item 5, which is an overview and update of the shared regulatory services. And can I ask Helen to take us into this, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'll make a start on this agenda item, the first overview and update report for this financial year for the service. But in true to form fashion, I'll be calling on colleagues to assist throughout the course of the report. So I'll begin at section 2.1 with a little bit of an outline of where we are in terms of some of the HR issues that we've looked at in previous months. And looking at our sickness absence figures for Q1, they have, I'm pleased to say, shown an improvement on the same period in 2022-23, and you'll see that the figure is actually around 50% less than it was in the previous quarter. There was, as members will remember, an issue with some long-term sickness absence. Those matters, I'm pleased to say, have been resolved. So I think we are now seeing the benefit of that with these much improved sickness absence rates. We've spoken a lot about our recruitment and retention concerns, and those arguments are quite well rehearsed. We're not alone. It is in common with public protection services right across Wales and the whole of the UK, quite frankly. Limited pool of staff from whom to recruit. And that is why adopting our growing our own approach has been so important. And some developments there to report. And this is very much lots of pieces of a jigsaw which we're putting into place, which over time I know will be of huge benefit. And one of those examples quite recently is the fact that we've been fast tracking 2 members of staff by supporting them to undertake the highest certificate qualification in food premises inspection. And this is instead of the full environmental health degree course. This is a more focused qualification on one particular aspect, the food premises inspection. And those 2 members of staff have successfully completed the first 2 years of study. So another example of how we're trying to plug some of these gaps by growing our own. We have a focus group of staff to look in detail at some of the concerns that we have around recruitment and retention and how we can address those. And that group is starting to come up with some really good suggestions, which we are looking into. Hopefully some relatively quick wins and some measures for the longer term, which we'll be able to reflect in an updated SRS workforce plan. I need to give thanks to Christina for some great work that she's been doing in building up some really good links with Cardiff Metropolitan University. And that's crucial for us as being an attractive go-to employer for graduates of the environmental health degree course there. And Christina's also been doing some work with the professional body, the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, to support their directory of student training opportunities. And SRS is the only service which has been able to offer what they call the full sweep of experiences for students and recent graduates coming into the environmental health profession. And the latter part of 2.4 there is a quote from the president of the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, thanking SRS and its constituent authorities who've been so willing to work with them to address the issue of graduate practical training. So a really nice reflection of the work that's been done there. And Christina's been busy. Coming on to 2.5, you'll see that she's also been assisting with something which has been called a coffee and chat style format put on by the Chartered Institute of Environmental Health, again, to assist those hoping to come into the environmental health profession with hints and tips for interview preparation and around that sort of whole employability issue. And then 2.6, the last point I wanted to share with members is around our tradition of supporting where we can staff for further development, personal development. And I'm really pleased to say that we've got 3 members of staff this week, in fact, starting on the MSc in Environmental Health for this academic year. And we will watch with interest how they progress over the period of the course, and also the regulatory apprenticeship. Just to report a quick update on that is continuing to progress, and we look forward to that going live at some point in the future. So that was my update on human resource matters, Chair. What I will do now, coming on to 2.7, this is the financial position for Q1. And I know that Gemma Jones is in the meeting and will be able to take us through the report and Appendix 1 to cover that.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. So obviously this is the Q1 position, so very early in the financial year. But we are seeing some kind of emerging themes within the SRS budget. So the monitoring report so far is summarised in Appendix 1 to the report, and the budget, as you'll be aware, was set on the 9th of February 2023, and it's just over 8.6 million. We did allow a net budget increase of 314,000, but that only assumed a 5% pay award and then an adjustment for the previous year's pay shortfall, and there were some agreed savings that were set for 23-24 also. We're seeing kind of indicators in 23-24 that the pay award is likely to be in excess of that sum, and so we'll need to keep that under review as we progress through the year. We are projecting an overall overspend of 170,000. This does include that historical adjustment for the Cardiff specific budget shortfall, 200,000, that relates to taxi licensing, and I know that influenced the outturn position last year also. And we've got the forecast outturn position that's illustrated within the executive summary on the face of the report. We are keeping under review the potential need to use the Shared Regulatory Service Reserve to resolve part of that forecast overspend position. In terms of the kind of wider budget. It does continue to be a challenging year for the Shared Regulatory Service, and we're continuing to see pressures around the cost of living crisis, some of those inflationary pressures, support for Home for Ukraine Refugees Initiative, and the continued impact of the COVID-19 pandemic through initiatives such as support for residential care homes. So those are some of the kind of additional pressures we're seeing across the service. The impact of the COVID pandemic is also continuing to have some impact on the income generation ability within the service. And so in summary, this report recommends that position as far as Q1 goes is noted by committee. Happy to take any questions or comments on the report.
Thank you very much, Gemma. Ruba.
Thanks, Chair. Gemma, just a quick question. We'll know later on the agenda when we look at the reports, sort of looking backwards, but also sort of looking forward to the fact that there will be some additional, with new legislation, we'll have additional requirements to, to do things like, the tattoo parlours and so on. So in terms of the 170,000, is that, because we're not getting extra funding for that, but is that part of this 100? I know this is only the first quarter, but is that part of the forecast that we're going to have to take on additional work with the same resources?
That's certainly contributing to the pressure within the service, but I don't think that is the reason for the overspend that we're reporting.
No. I realise that, but yeah. I'm just wondering if that's is that incorporated in that forecast? But because otherwise, it could well be more than that, couldn't it?
Absolutely. I'm not 100% sure. Apologies. I can take it away and find out and just clarify for committee if that's okay.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ruba. Can I just ask, Gemma? So with that historic overspend from taxi licenses, so what's our plan to get rid of that, if we have one, or do we intend to just carry it forward forever?
I think we need to continue to kind of reach out to our colleagues in Cardiff and try and address that as part of the budget process. So I think unless there is a correction or a transfer that reflects that that allocation of income between Cardiff and the Shared Regulatory Service, I think we're gonna see that position essentially every year. Yeah.
Okay, that's useful. Thank you ever so much. Unless anyone else has any questions for Gemma? No, Gemma, thank you ever so much. Right, Helen, could you pick us up from 2.8, please?
Lovely, thank you, Chair. I apologise, I should have said I'm happy to take any questions on the HR issues that I ran through initially. I was so excited to get onto the finance, I forgot to mention them.
Easily done. Any questions for Helen on the first part of her presentation? No? Could I ask, Helen, if it's okay? In 2.3, you mentioned the staff focus groups and some cost neutral easy wins. I was just wondering what they were.
There are a number of different things that we're looking at. Some of them obviously will take a little while to embed. Others, changes in nomenclature for job titles, for example. We have quite an unusual in the shared service. We have quite an unusual terminology for our professional officers. So rather than them being called in the structure an environmental health officer or a trade and standards officer, they're known as possibly a neighbourhood services officer or a commercial services officer. So we're about to do a consultation on whether that would be a simple cost neutral change that could be made. The feedback that we're getting is that in the way that individuals apply for jobs these days, they don't wait for the paper to land on a Thursday anymore. That has all gone out in the ARC. The way that people look for jobs now is a Google search, and the feedback we're getting is that if you want to look for a job as an environmental health officer, you're not going to be putting in to that search neighbourhood services officer. So it's a very, very simple change. Obviously needs to be done through the HR process, but things like that, we're looking to see what can be done, to attract more people so that they're aware that we have jobs available, and then crucially, what more can we do better to retain those staff.
Good stuff. Thank you. Thank you ever so much.
Okay, so we are now at section 2.8 in the report, and we're going to look at performance monitoring. So what I'm going to do here, Chair, if I may, is to ask Christina and Will to present Appendix 2. And it's very, very good teamwork here, because Jason is going to share his screen so that we can actually run through those performance tables.
Thanks, Helen, and thanks, Jason, for sharing your screen there. So we're on to the usual reporting of performance indicators. First of all, for the food service. So the slide in which you can see in front of you relates to high risk food businesses, namely category A and B. I know you hear this from me every time, but just to give you a reminder, category A food businesses require a intervention or an inspection from us once every 6 months, and category B once every 12 months. You'll see in front of you that we've got 2 ambers and 1 green. The ambers, they relate to Bridgend and the Vale of Glamorgan, and you can see that there was actually 1 missed off in Bridgend and 1 missed in the Vale of Glamorgan in terms of being completed in Q1, but they have subsequently been met, and those visits have now been completed. It's quite odd the way in which we report this, because of course we are 3 days away from end of Q2, so this is some time ago, so nothing to be concerned about in terms of the amber report, and those inspections have been completed. Moving on then, Jason, if you can, to the next slide, relates to category C rated inspections. So these are inspections that have a frequency of once every 18 months to be inspected. Now, of course, you'll see some reds in front of you, but again, to give some comfort in terms of the figures that you're seeing, you'll recall that previously, up until this financial year, we've been working towards the Food Standards Agency recovery plan. So that was that infographic that we kept sharing each committee, detailing how authorities were to prioritise their inspection in accordance with risk, because of course of the backlog associated with COVID-19 and the pandemic. That was the Food Standards Agency's way of communicating to us which premises we need to target. So we've come off that recovery plan, although we are still working closely with the Food Standards Agency in detailing how we're responding to that risk. So although you're seeing lots of red there, we can see that an improvement is being made each quarter in terms of that backlog of inspections. Moving on then, Jason, if I may, to the new businesses. Again, you are seeing some reds here. But of course, as I mentioned, coming off the recovery plan and moving on to the normal programme, we've agreed with the Food Standards Agency that our priority in terms of targeting the inspections overdue is to look at our category A and B as a full high risk inspection. And in terms of category C, we're now on the backlog of 4-star food hygiene rating inspections. And in terms of new, we've agreed with the Food Standards Agency that we conduct visits to those known high risk businesses in terms of the practices that they are undertaking. So it's hoped that as time goes on and we're able to get rid of some of this backlog, we'll fall back into track. But for now, we do need to go through a process in terms of meeting the higher risk outstanding inspections that we have on our books. Moving on then, Jace, if I may. So these are the broadly compliant figures. You'll know this is not an assessment in terms of our performance. This is actually how the food businesses are doing on inspection, what we're finding. So lots of greens there. In each area of SRS, we are reporting above the national average in terms of broadly compliant. So those premises scoring 3 or above. But you will notice that they've lessened slightly since last quarter. And again, we've been continuing to brief that we are seeing a sort of a higher level of enforcement, that the premises that we are getting to, we are finding some issues. So they have lowered slightly from last quarter, but nevertheless, still very good level of compliance there throughout the region, which it gives us confidence in terms of our eating establishments. So that is the performance in terms of food. I'm just going to stop there until I move on to trading standards to see if there's any questions in the room, Chair, should they need to be on food before I go on to trading standards performance.
Thank you very much, Christina. Are there any questions from members? No. Could I ask if it's all right very quickly with that FSA catch-up programme? Firstly, did you find it beneficial? Did it have a positive effect? Was it useful for us? And secondly, have we come off it because we've reached a certain level of, we've caught up sufficiently, as it were, or have we come off it because it only lasted a certain length of time?
Yeah, so in terms of was it helpful, it was, Councillor, because it did give that sort of high risk framework to work towards. I think when you're reporting PIs and you're constantly reporting, seeing that red colour, it is quite off-putting, not only for us as a management team, but also for the team in trying to achieve. So it did give us something to work towards. And again, it just focused on our minds in terms of the high risk premises that we need to be targeting. And we agreed with the milestones that they had. Now, although their time limit in effect for the recovery plan has ended, we are not quite ready to go on to the normal programme of inspection, so your category A to E. So we are still in talks with the Food Standards Agency. So we meet with them, Jason and I meet with the Food Standards Agency on a quarterly basis, just to talk through with them our progress, but also to communicate with them what risk-based approach we're adopting in order to achieve that backlog. Otherwise, it can just look like a mountain of premises that maybe, you're looking at numbers rather than the importance and what's driving where our resource is needed. So our discussions with the FSA are still frequent. They're still each quarter, and I'll touch on this later on in the Food Law Enforcement Service Plan. For me, this is the year in which we need to do all that we can to try and catch up, get back onto an even keel, if you like, for next financial year, really to go back into a normal programme of works in terms of just the A to E. So it is challenging. The pandemic, of course, was challenging for us all, but lots of the food service was repurposed in terms of doing that work. Of course, during the restrictions, we weren't able to carry out those inspections. But also, one thing to bear in mind is SRS is like no other authority in Wales in terms of size and scale. We've got 6,500 food businesses on our books. Some of the sort of more valleys type authorities have nowhere near the churn of new businesses that we have. So, the size and scale is very different. But of course, it is a need really to focus our resource where it needs to be, rather than targeted interventions that perhaps, can come a little later, if you like.
Yeah, that's really useful. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on then to trading standards, high risk, first of all, you'll see that just in Cardiff, one premise was missed in terms of the within the prescribed frequency, but that was carried out in July. So nothing to be concerned about there in terms of high risk trading standards inspections. And moving on to trading standards, new businesses. Again, you're going to see some reds here, but again, just to offer a little bit of an explanation, if I may, I've explained previously that some of our food hygiene inspections, we get a what I call a buy one get one free in some of these visits, in that our environmental health colleagues carry out the food standards element of the inspection at the same time as hygiene, where you're seeing a backlog and sort of a performance issue in terms of hygiene. That has a direct correlation in terms of trading standards, because food standards falls under the remit of trading standards sort of holistically. So again, when we improve in terms of the food hygiene results, trading standards should of course increase at the same time. So I think that is it in terms of my update, but as I said, I'll touch more on food later on in the agenda items, because of course we're presenting the food law enforcement service plan. So if there's no questions for me, I think we're moving on to Will's area now in terms of an update.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, Will.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chris. So yeah, thanks, Jason. Starting off with domestic noise complaints. This, just for members, is the target where we aim to reach complainants within 3 days of domestic noise and air complaints, and the target is 90%. You'll see that overall the SRS across the 3 areas has exceeded the target, which is pleasing. There was a slight shortfall in Bridgend, which I think was due to some sort of periodic pressure in the team, but in the main, that's a target that we've achieved, and the team have done well there. Can you move on to the next one, Jace? So I think I've talked about this in the past. This is a slightly more challenging target for the team. And as you'll see, unusually, there are a few reds in here, which I think relate to the nature of the target. So we aim to reach complainants within 1 working day of a complaint being made about a commercial or an industrial noise complaint. And the reason we differentiate and have a slightly different target is simply because normally those cases have the potential to impact on a wider sector of the community. That's with commercial and industrial complaints. And also we can normally get hold of a business within 1 working day to at least discuss initially what the complaint may be. In this case, we've failed to meet that overall across the SRS, and there's 2 main reasons for that. One is demands on the service. You know, there has been a lot of complaints come in, but also it's a matter that we are discussing internally, in that some complaints aren't being logged in a timely fashion in order for officers to enable them to meet the target. So we're looking at streamlining that process together with Jason's administrative teams, so that it'll allow then officers to get the complaint and respond to them within the target frame time that we have. So hopefully there'll be an improvement on that over the coming quarters. Do you want to move to the next one, Jace? So this is the performance in relation to complaints of alarms, and you know, I think you'll see that apart from the owned complaint, we've managed to achieve those. So well done to the team. Moving on to licensing. I think whenever I get to this point, I just like to say thank you to the team, because they're always green. So that's a positive. Finally, then, I'd like to bring members' attention to some new performance measures related to minimum energy efficiency standards, or MEES. So members may recall that in our report of December 22, I advised them of a programme being developed by SRS to contact owners, agents and landlords of rented properties which were rated F or G or had no rating. So under the current legislation, any rented property, although there are exemptions, should be rated E or above. So that piece of work has taken place, and from the table you will see that we have engaged with the 241 properties we identified across the SRS, and at the moment have secured improvement in the rating, the energy performance certificate of the property, for 33 of those properties, and that's through direct action of the SRS in engagement and signposting to methods by which the EPC can be improved. I should stress this is only a very early snapshot on the work that is being undertaken, and we fully expect those figures to improve as we report back over the coming quarters. Still in the early days of the work, and we're currently in the process of validating our records on unrated properties in order to engage with landlords and ensure that we encourage them to meet the required standard. There's an estimate in the text of reduction in CO2 produced by those properties as a result of the work that we've done. The estimate is that we reduce that by over 100 tonnes of carbon dioxide and over 91,000 kilowatt hours of energy. So initial starting point for this work, but I think members will agree it's pleasing to see some impact, and hopefully as we go through the further quarters we'll be able to report back on those figures. So that's me. I don't know if anyone has any questions on any of the either noise or air or the efficiency standards work.
Thank you, Will. Any questions, colleagues? Ruba.
Just a quick one, Will. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
So, is there an increase in noisy businesses, or in terms of the kind of the workload?
No, I think the principal reason, as I sort of alluded to, for us failing to meet targets in relation to commercial and industrial noise, and you're right, in the main, these are entertainment venues that we get complaints about, although we do get complaints about industry as well. I think it's an internal matter that we need to resolve, in that the target is 1 working day. So 1 working day is obviously a strict target, and particularly over a weekend period. So if a complaint comes in on a Friday, then we have further complaints on a weekend relating to other premises. There'll be a backlog then, which the administrative team are finding difficult to manage on the Monday. And so Jason has been in discussion with some of his team managers to perhaps put further resource at the front of the week to enable us to get those complaints out to the officers in order for them to meet the target. So that's the main reason. We also have, particularly in Cardiff, at the moment, we've had a few vacancies, so that's been part of it as well. So it's a combination of factors that has led to that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Will. Are there any other questions? Pamela.
I was just going to ask about alarm complaints.
Yeah.
I remember years and years ago, we used to have terrible ones in the Heath Hospital. Has that improved? Because I can remember lying in bed in the Heath Hospital with the alarm going off, nobody taking any notice whatsoever.
I wouldn't know. I don't know, I should say, of any particular problem related to the hospital. I would say, having worked in environmental health for more years than I care to remember, that alarms did used to be more of an issue than they are now, simply because they are better designed, and they have all of them, without exception, should have a 20-minute cutoff, which is the maximum that the alarm could ring. So they're much better than they were, but we still do get complaints. But I have to say, I don't know of any particular issues with the Heath Hospital.
Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pamela. Can I ask you, Will, about the energy efficiency work? I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, it's a frustration of mine that in local government we do some really amazing work that we struggle to shout about, because I think we should be highlighting to the public we've done that, obviously from an environmental point of view and from a cost of living angle. So any thoughts on how we can celebrate that?
Well, I share your sentiment. It's a subject close to my heart. I think we do need to champion the work of the teams. And certainly, yes, I mean, we've updated our website. So the website is across the 3 areas is much better than it was. But I think in relation to this particular piece of work, yes, I think we could and will do more. And I'm sure that's something we can take up as a management team to discuss how we might do that.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Will.
I think Helen was going to take us through the last bit of these performance measures, if that's right, Helen.
Yeah, thanks, Will. And this one really is just a little extra. We bring to Joint Committee every quarter the detail of the concluded prosecutions, and that will come a little bit later. This performance measure is purely a way of quantifying the success rate of prosecution. So when something becomes a prosecution, their success in the court process, in effect. So this has been fed into the 3 corporate centres as an additional performance measure, but it doesn't really tell us any more than we already know from the detail of the reports that are brought to Joint Committee. So happy to take any questions on that, but appreciate there's no actual detail of any cases in there.
Any questions, colleagues? No, I don't think so. Thank you, Helen.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Back to me very briefly, just to say that we're moving down now to 2.10 in the report. And I'm just about to hand back to Christina for a brief outline of 2 more of our statutory plans. You'll be familiar with the plans that we bring to you each year. So Christina is going to give a mention to the Communicable Disease Plan and the Port Health Plan for 2023-24.
Thanks, Helen. And yes, again, as Helen said, just a very, very brief mention. Both the Communicable Disease Service Plan and the Port Health Service Plan is something that we do each year. Again, it just details our work in terms of those 2 areas in protecting public health and the interventions and work that we do on that basis. Chair, it wasn't my plan to go through these plans page by page. It was for information and noting only.
Yeah,
so
fine.
Here to take questions on each of the Communicable Disease Service Plan and the Port Health Service Plan, should any members need any further information on them.
Thank you, Christina. Any questions, friends? No, I don't think so. So thank you, Christina.
Okay, I think it's me next, Chair. So the next items represent just a very brief update on the work of our neighbourhood services teams in relation to private sector housing and the work being undertaken in relation to bringing empty properties back into beneficial use. So looking at the regulation of the private rented sector first, I think most members probably will recognise that this is one of the most challenging times on record. Certainly in my experience in local government as an EHO working in the housing field on and off for over 30 years, it certainly feels like that to me. And I think a combination of mortgage rates, rent rises, energy costs and high demand has placed pressure on landlords, renters and councils alike. Some have classed it as a perfect storm in housing terms, and I think that's probably correct. So the SRS teams, our neighbourhood services officers, our environmental health officers who operate across the 3, have seen both an increase in complaints and also the numbers and types of properties in very poor conditions, possibly partly due to financial issues that landlords have in maintaining them, although I don't think that's the whole story. So what the report has tried to do is just briefly pick out a few cases. I'd start with one, a fine issued in Cardiff of £68,000 for a company which failed to obtain HMO licenses or carry out important safety repairs. And the reason we license houses in multiple occupation is because of the increased risk fire safety issues being present in those properties, and also the amenity issues that can sometimes take place. So it's very good to see the backing of the courts recognising the seriousness of the breaches that were put before them, which isn't always the case, but it is a reminder to other landlords who maybe need to do work that, you know, the courts will look unfavourably where they put the risk, put the safety of tenants at risk. So there's also the second item I just want to highlight. There's been an increase in filthy and verminous properties, some of which you may have seen reported in the media recently. They're always a good media story, aren't they? And there's some good pictures that they can show in the papers or online. These cases are increasing, and we've always found them to be very, very time consuming. They involve multiple agencies coming together in an attempt to try and resolve the issues that the hoarder or the filthy and verminous property may have. And what they do is place a very large burden on the officers involved. So while they might be a relatively small number in comparison with the complaints that the teams have, they do punch above their weight in their ability to suck up resource, and that's something we're finding an issue. The last item, which again is linked to Cardiff, is an example of a serious breach of some emergency prohibition orders that we have served, where we are working closely with South Wales Fire and Rescue Service to secure the safety of residents. So whilst Cardiff has the largest private rented sector in Wales, and obviously has those concentration of issues that you get in a capital city, Bridgend and the Vale also have experienced similar increases in demand for services, as is detailed in the report. And we have recently held refresher training again for staff across the service in respect of damp and mould complaints, following the tragic death of a 2-year-old in Rochdale linked to poor housing conditions, which contributed to the child's death. So that's quite a high-profile case, and that has in itself quite correctly generated concerns and increased demand on the services of the environmental health teams. Staff, I guess, will soon be entering what is traditionally the busiest time for housing enforcement teams over the winter period. And we haven't seen the normal drop-off that we get seasonally in the summer. So we will keep members advised as to how we manage our resources and deploy them to try and manage that demand across the 3 councils, basically. Moving to empty properties, on a slightly more positive note, I guess, it's satisfying to update members on the work of officers across the SRS on tackling the blight of empty properties. The report itself outlines the work undertaken in Bridgend and Cardiff principally in preparing action plans to tackle problematic empty properties and the successes we achieved. And these include the use of powers such as compulsory purchase orders, use of enforcement notices, and the use of enforced sale of properties when we undertake work in default to rectify public health or nuisance issues being caused by the empty home. So that is a success story, and there's a lot of work. It's a whole authority approach where the SRS in Cardiff and Bridgend have certainly pulled the various strands together to make sure that we try and do our utmost to bring those properties back into beneficial use. And finally then, just for members to note, as is the case in Bridgend and Cardiff, we have recently had additional dedicated resource provided to us in the Vale using the council tax premium. So we're actually, I will be interviewing along with the team manager candidates for an additional neighbourhood services officer to provide a similar kind of service, well, an identical service that we have in Cardiff and Bridgend to the Vale of Glamorgan. So we'll in effect be covering all three authorities with that empty homes work, which is really pleasing, and I know it's something we've been looking to do for quite a while. So that is kind of a very brief whistle-stop tour of some of the challenges and the work being done by the housing teams in the SRS, and I'm happy to take any queries.
Thank you, Will. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Will. We've got an issue in one of my wards with a letting agent. He is known to SRS. He's known to Emma. Basically, if somebody complains about damp or any issues with the house, he's threatening them with eviction. So we've now got an issue where people are afraid to report things. They're telling me, but they're telling me not to report it because they're afraid of being evicted. So I'm waiting to have a meeting with our MS now to see, what sort of laws there are, and what we can do about it. And he does have the monopoly in the community of having the most rental properties.
Right. I mean, the legislation has recently changed or is changing in relation to that kind of area. I think probably the best thing I could suggest, Councillor Lewis, is that myself and you meet outside of this meeting, and we can have a proper discussion about the facts and what the SRS can do to assist you and your residents and your constituents, rather, in this case. So I think that probably would be the most appropriate approach, rather than discuss it in the committee, if you're happy with that.
Yeah, that's great. That'd be really good. Thanks, Will.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Well, could I ask if it's all right? I mean, talking about the work in the private sector, housing work you've been doing. I mean, it's probably more important now than ever before. We're living in extraordinary times. Private rents are out of control. The balance of power between tenants and landlords has probably never been more out of kilter. I mean, do you think it's worth us lobbying the respective councils for more resource for this area? Or do you just think that looking at the kind of financial context we're in, we'd just be whistling in the wind?
Well, it's difficult, as an operational manager, I think I would always be able to do quite a bit more with more resource. We do have certain schemes in Cardiff, for instance. We've got additional licensing schemes where we charge, in effect, the sector for our inspection regime. Yeah. So we can recoup money directly from the people we're regulating, the landlords, in effect. So that is an assistance and allows us to do far more work than we would otherwise be able to do. We also get, as I stated, some money through the various councils as a result of the council tax premium. And I think that is an issue that we can discuss, because I think those premiums are being increased depending on the authority, and maybe we could do more with more money. So I think that's something we can certainly discuss. And as with all of our teams, and I'm speaking here as a senior manager in the SRS, I know from speaking to colleagues, all of our teams are under extreme pressure, and the housing teams are no different. And yes, we could certainly do with more resource, but I'm sure Christina would make that claim, as would Jason. So it's how we manage that with the partner authorities, I guess, in the current financial situation.
So it would seem to me, especially when you bear in mind how large the sector is.
Yes.
And compared to how much resource we have, so I mean, it'd be worthwhile trying to.
Yeah, and certainly if you take Councillor Diath, Cardiff, there's no doubt that it accounts for, and don't quote me on this, between 80 and 20% of all the private rental properties in Wales. So it's a very, very concentrated area of work, and the demand is huge and increasing. And and certainly if you look historically at the you know, the resource that has been devoted to that over the years, it has no doubt shrunk. The enforcement teams have got smaller, you know, inevitably as a result of local government finance. So I would certainly say yes, we could do with more resource. Yes.
Okay, well, thank you, Ruba.
Yeah, just really coming on the back of what you were saying, Chair, and that you've raised earlier. It is something I think that, of course, more resources would be wonderful, but which obviously we can each of us lobby our authorities to look at that. But it's also something that we have to bear in mind when we're budgeting, when we're setting our budget. That, you know, when we're looking at the savings we have to make, you know, we have to be you know, realistic in that, and not, you know, if you're looking at, you know, making a 10% saving, that's nonsense given the amount of work you have to do and the fact that resources, you know, may not be increased. So I think it is something that we do, you know, need to take forward when we're looking at our budgets in the future. Sorry, that was all I was going to say, but that, you know, it's a good thing to have raised.
No, I couldn't agree more, Ruba. Absolutely. Can I ask you one more quick question, if that's all right, Will?
Yeah.
In 2.22, it talks about using compulsory purchase orders, but I wasn't clear in that context. Had we used them to force the owner to put the house out onto the market, or did we use them to buy the property ourselves and then sold it on?
What happens? I mean, there's various areas. It's quite a complicated issue, but in the main, what happens is we will purchase the property as a council, and then we will sell it and recoup the monies that we have we have expended on it.
Do we have the power to kind of cut out the middleman and just force them to put it straight onto the market without us buying it, or have we got to be the ones who purchase the property?
Well, the enforced sale that you're referring there to, the enforced sale element is simpler and far less legally difficult. You know, there are lots of rules and procedures you have to follow in a CPO because you are taking a property off someone. But the enforced sale relates to, for instance, you might have a property where it's overgrown. There are rats running around there. Bits of it are falling off into next door, or there's dampness being caused to next door. And what we can do, we have powers under the Building Act and Housing Act to serve notice on the owner. And if they don't undertake the works that we deem necessary, either to abate a nuisance or remedy a defect, then we can appoint a contractor to go in and do that work. And if we build up, say, £15,000-20,000 worth of work, we can then try and get that money back as a local authority by enforcing the sale of the property, which in effect takes the property then back onto the market and back into beneficial use. So it's another tool that local authorities have to use. It's not as simple as that, obviously, but that is the general idea behind it.
Okay, aggressive. Thank you ever so much, Will. Right,
okay.
Over to you, please, Jason, for 2.24.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just giving members some updates on some of the work we're doing around supporting the local economy, and just an update on some of our primary authority work that we've undertaken in Q1. Members obviously aware of what primary authority is and allows business to enter a statutory partnership with a local authority of its choice, and through that partnership we can offer assured advice to those businesses. It's obviously primary authority is beneficial for businesses. They're able to take and act upon advice from one local authority rather than having to face resource-intensive alternatives facing other local authorities, really. So at the start of Q1 for 23-24, we can confirm that we've had primary authority partnerships with SRS now stands at 34. And that includes a mix of direct partnerships with some national, regional and local businesses. So ranging from anything from Tesco's to Sainsbury's to Waitrose to some more local ones such as Dunraven Windows and Nathaniel Car Sales. And we've included a full list of the primary authority partners that work for SRS in Appendix 5 for members to look through and look at what the advice we're giving to each of those partnerships really. And since the start of February, really 2023, we've increased our partnership with the major retailers, and this has really expanded quite a lot of the volume of work that we're dealing with, because we are now responsible for administrating all the food hygiene referrals from across England and Wales on that. Another pieces of work that we've done on the Primary Authority has included review of hazard systems, assured advice on pest control, underage sales training, and we've given advice in Q1 to 18 of those 34 partnerships really, so quite an expanse of the work that the team have done under that really. And we're currently in some early negotiations with some other sort of partners who have come to us seeking some Primary Authority partnerships potentially. And so those ongoing discussions are taking place in the extent and the level of support we can give to those potential partners. And as those discussions progress and we get those partnerships signed up, we'll give a further update through the course of the year to members on that. Just turning to our training. So again, this is a key component to some of our income generation work that we're looking to do. And we've been continuing with delivering our training courses on food safety, health and safety, allergens, hazard training, and the special procedures infection 2 level 2 course, which is all taught by our fully qualified mental health and training standards officers. And quite interesting, what we're undertaking a lot in Q1 in terms of the training is actually working with our partner councils to deliver in-house training to members of staff, primarily around our level 1 and level 2 food safety courses. And we've also been working with our social care and community learning colleagues to provide food safety training to their staff as well. So I don't know if there's any questions that members may have on some of those proactive work around supporting the local economy. I'm happy to take those. Otherwise, I'll move on to the information on the Air Quality and Soundscapes Bill that we've included in the report as well.
Any questions, colleagues? Can I just say, Jason, it sounds like you've marketed the primary authority really well and got a quite a vibrant
it is
base, so.
Yeah, and I think that's really down to the the proactive nature of the team. They really see the benefits of the primary authority, having they've been working through it for a number of years really. And we strongly support that. We're attending the Wales Partnerships with Primary Authority. One of our officers is the chair of that group really, so it's really proactive, and we really see the benefits of it, and so do the businesses really. So it's quite exciting that that's continuing to progress really.
Yeah, so well done to all involved. Just one thought I had in relation to the training you provide to externals. I mean, has any thought been given to providing it in languages other than English and Welsh? Just bearing in mind how big the potential market might be in Cardiff.
We recently, over the summer, we actually run our first training course where we provided in Hindi. So that was to a number of members in the Cardiff community, really. So we made contact with an external trainer, basically, who was able to deliver the course both in English and Hindi languages, really. So again, we're looking to extend that because we appreciate, a lot of the communities. There is a language barrier to them attending the courses. So yeah, we've looked to extend that already this summer.
Wonderful, brilliant.
Brilliant. Yeah, so just moving on then to an update on the Air Quality and Soundscapes Bill, which Welsh Government introduced to the Senate in March earlier this year. So this is Welsh Government's bill, where it's a key step bringing measures that contribute to further improvements to the quality of the environment in Wales and reducing the impacts of air pollution and noise pollution. It's quite a wide-ranging bill, but what it's looking to do is introduce a framework for setting national air quality targets and amending existing legislation. As the report says there in 2.32, it's looking at the National Air Quality Strategy, local air quality management, smoke control aspects, trunk road charging schemes, and vehicle idling. From our perspective, the big impacts potentially are going to be around the local air quality management. The bill is going to change the system, is proposing to change the system, how local authorities monitor air pollution and take action to actually reduce it. The current way local air quality management works is that local authorities only actually have to look towards achieving compliance, and the bill is looking to amend that so that a more holistic review is undertaken and authorities will actually be challenged to actually ensure that compliance is achieved. And one of the other aspects is we expect that there will be new air quality targets for local authorities, and particularly around particulate matter 2.5. So myself and other officers have been attending working groups with Welsh Government, including the cross-party group on the clean air, and also specific workshops that Welsh Government have been holding on looking at developing those new air quality targets. So the bill is progressing its way through the Senedd procedures. I believe that's currently at stage 2 before making it then becomes Royal Assent and made into law, basically. So happy to take any questions on that piece of work that we're working with Welsh Government on the bill.
Any questions, friends? Could I ask? It's quite a niche question, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
If you don't mind. But with the bill, one of the things I noticed that are in there is about charging for the use of trunk roads.
Yeah.
Is that enacting the secondary legislation from the 2000 Transport Act in Wales?
Yeah, so basically, Welsh Government are obviously responsible for air quality matters on the trunk roads. So anything from from the M4 to the A470. And obviously they've identified that there is non-compliances for NO2 on some of those roads. So one of the retained measures they've looked at is trying to implement clean air zones potentially on those measures, basically. But the way the Transport Act is set out is actually, it doesn't allow them to implement clean air zones on those trunk roads. It only allows them to put charges where there's either a bridge or a tunnel over 600 meters, or where a local authority is looking to enact charging on a trunk road that they allow that. So I think they're looking to change the legislation so that they could look to implement a clean air zone on the trunk roads that they're responsible for, so where they've got air quality problems, because it is one of their retained measures. But legally, as I understand it, they couldn't actually implement one because the Act doesn't allow them to do so. That's the aspect that they're looking to amend as part of the bill, basically.
Okay, brilliant, great stuff. Because one other thought, I mean, can you see the Welsh Government having any appetite to address the issue of domestic wood burners, or is that something that you think they're Yeah,
so they have undertaken a consultation on domestic wood burning, but as I understand it, the results of that consultation haven't been published in line with the actual bill coming into place. The bill is looking at potentially smoke control, but that relates to the measures under the Clean Air Act 1993, where a local authority has powers to declare a smoke control area. All they're looking to do, as the bill proposes at the minute, is that the penalties within the Clean Air Act is it's a criminal offence at the minute to breach the smoke control area. They're then looking to change those to more civil sanctions, really, to give authorities a bit more of an easier way to enforce those, basically. But currently, within the shared service areas we enact, there's actually been no smoke control areas declared. There's only actually 4 across all of Wales at the minute. So again, I think there has been some slight criticism of Welsh Government. They haven't looked to include the results of the consultation as part of the bill to enact further measures. So there may be further proposals coming out of that consultation as and when they release that, really.
Sure, good stuff.
Okay, so then just moving to section 2.36 and just really highlighting some excellent news for us again, really, is for the work we do under the Animal Health and Welfare. So SRS again applied for and has received some what we call the paw print awards from the RSPCA. And this has been, we've increased our awards here again this year to actually get a gold award, which is the highest that is awarded for all the categories that we applied for. So that relates to animal licensing, stray dog provision, and our kennels provisioning. And again, we're the only service in the UK to receive the gold standards in all of these 3 categories, really. And this just shines a light on the team, all the hard work that they do, and we're going the extra mile, to protecting the welfare of animals across the shared regulatory authority areas. So I'll pause there. If there's any questions on any of those aspects, happy to take those as well.
Any questions, colleagues? I don't think so.
Brilliant. I think Helen's picking up the rest of the report then.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Good to see you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you, Chair. Just moving down to 2.38. Members will have no doubt seen lots in the media of late around vapes and the concerns about those. And I have included quite a bit of information. I'm not going to dwell on all of this this morning, but just to give assurance that SRS are looking at this whole issue of vapes. And just very briefly to pull out the main areas of concern, which I'm sure you'll be aware of. So looking at the marketing of vapes, they used to be called electronic cigarettes. There's no doubt that they provide a very important function in providing a means for smokers to give up the habit. But the concern is that the marketing of vapes, all the colours, all the flavours, the beautiful pastel packaging, etc., is attracting not just people who are trying to give up tobacco, but they are attracting non-smokers, and obviously the huge concern is that it's attracting youngsters as well. So some information there about marketing, and I've included a photograph just to show in a tiny corner shop the vast array of product that is out there. Clearly there's no display ban for vapes and vape products as there is for tobacco. Concerns around underage sales, and I've included in 2.40 the statistic of the results of our test purchasing attempts across the SRS region for nicotine containing vapes, which obviously have an age 18 restriction on them. 24% of those attempts to purchase by a young volunteer resulted in a sale, which is extremely high, much higher than we have traditionally been seeing with tobacco and with test purchasing of alcohol. So a real concern there. We're also seeing a problem with illegal vapes, and these are vapes that don't comply with quite prescriptive regulation. So they won't be registered with the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. They may have tank sizes that are greater than permitted. So 2 millilitres is the maximum permitted, which equates to around 600 puffs. We have been seeing them far in excess of that. And also in terms of the nicotine strength, there's a limit on nicotine strength for a legal vape, and that isn't reflected in an illegal vape, which quite often is a product brought into the UK, which wasn't intended for the UK market. So again, a snapshot for members, in 22-23 in the SRS region alone, there were 37 seizures of illegal vapes, so vapes seized from 37 premises with a combined retail value of around £51,000. So a big problem, and concerns that the same supply chains are being used by the people who are marketing illegal vapes as illegal tobacco, and there's some commonality there, and things that we're familiar with illegal tobacco, like concealment in and around retail premises, is being reflected in the vapes market as well for illegal vapes. So concerns around product safety as well. Some of these illegal vapes, testing, not by SRS, but testing elsewhere, has shown presence of heavy metals. So again, a big concern. So much so, Welsh Government and Public Health Wales really concerned about all of these strands of concern around the vapes market. So just noted in 2.45 that Public Health Wales has been administering a vaping in children and young people incident response group, and SRS has been representing Direct Protection Wales group on that incident response group, and we look forward to the recommendations of that group coming to fruition in the not too distant future. They've already issued some guidance for schools where, again, the use of vapes by young people has been causing some issues. And Trading Standards Wales has actually submitted a bid to Welsh Government to see if there's any possibility of some funding to support some additional work around the concerns with vapes. Things like assistance, we've been able to dispose of illegal vapes. They contain lithium batteries. They can't be disposed of through normal channels. So it would be a specialist facility for disposing of those. So that's the kind of thing that is being put into this request for additional funding. So obviously, as soon as we know more about that, then we will update Joint Committee on that. So I can pause there, Chair, if there are any queries about vapes.
Thank you, Helen. Any questions, friends? Pamela.
I'm of the opinion single vape should be banned anyway, but that's my only opinion. But we went to a visit to the recycling centre in Cardiff the other day, and they were saying what damage they're doing, they're catching fire in because they're not disposed of properly, and it's a real issue at the moment. So I don't know how we overcome that. I know there's supposed to be special places to dispose them in the shops you buy them from, but I don't know whether every shop has got that.
That's a really good question, Councillor Drake. The vapes that contain batteries, they should be disposed of as waste electrical equipment. And clearly there's huge market now in disposable vapes. They're seen as single use and they're being discarded in, I understand, domestic refuse or even just as litter. So again, it's another way in which this massive explosion in the vapes market is touching on different service areas across local authorities, so waste management, education, as well as the enforcement side of things.
Yeah, that's good, because years and years ago when people took up smoking, they didn't know what damage tobacco was going to do to your lungs. What damage are these young people can have in the future? Yeah, awful thing to think about.
Thank you, Pamela. Can I ask, just out of curiosity, Helen? So these vapes that are coming into the UK that are not meant for the domestic market and are super strong, etc., which market are they meant for? Because presumably it can't be Europe either, because I imagine they would have similar standards to us. So where are they? Where should have they been going?
Yeah, I don't have the detailed share, but I believe that there may be projects coming into the UK which are intended for the US market, which
Right.
obviously will have labelling on them, which is in English, but it doesn't comply with the legislation here.
Sure.
But I can certainly check on that for you.
Great, so thank you.
Okay, so I will briefly come down to 2.48, and this is just to highlight a really successful case by the Wales Illegal Money Lending Unit recently, which members may have seen covered in the press. And the interesting thing around this, clearly, this represents a big uptick in concerns around loan sharks preying on individuals, particularly now in the cost of living crisis. This case was a little bit unusual because rather than it being perhaps your stereotypical loan shark that we probably got to get an appreciation of, this was actually an 83-year-old lady that was lending money to individuals. They were quite fearful of her tactics, and some of them were actually trapped into spiraling debt because she was charging them more per month than the couple's actual income. So a great case to have that concluded, a really good investigation. 2.51 down to 2.54. I won't dwell on these, Chair. This is just to advise members of some audits that we've had done, the annual audits across the SRS on the financial controls and also on the Wales Illegal Money Lending Grant. And I've included the detail there, and they've come out really positively. Happy to pause if there are any questions on that. Otherwise, I'll come down to 2.55.
I don't think there are any questions, colleagues. No? Okay.
Lovely. So 2.55, this is something that Councillor Stephen Yarnham highlighted a little earlier. And this is just a note really to identify some of the additional areas of work which will be putting more demands on the service. We've spoken at length about the special procedures work and the new licensing regime there around tattooing, skin colouring, cosmetic piercing, etc. That is still scheduled to come in mid-2024, and there's a lot of work obviously to be geared up for that. Jason has mentioned the Air Quality and Soundscapes Wales Bill earlier in the report. That is something which is on the horizon. And another example is the Environmental Protection Single-Use Plastics Wales Act. And again, enforcement responsibility will fall to public protection services. So it's very complementary, I think, that public protection services are being expected to pick up these areas of work, but it puts extra demands on the service, as we've spoken about earlier. And then the last point in this report, Chair, is on enforcement activity and Appendix 6. And this is where I've included the detail of the cases that have concluded between April the 1st and as late in the day as I could get it before this meeting. So it's to the end of August. Just very quickly, we're covering areas of law around food safety, housing, taxis. There's a car warranty issue, a failure to display a food hygiene rating scheme sticker, illegal tobacco, rogue trader activity, illegal money lending, and empty homes work. So it's right across the range. And I'm more than happy to take any questions on the detail of the cases, either now or afterwards. But I think the takeaway for me, looking at this Appendix 6, is the fact that that backlog that we've been talking about in the court process really seems to be working its way through. And when we compare exactly the same reporting period this time last year, we've got 50% more cases actually coming out and concluding through the court process. So that's really positive. We're actually getting through that backlog.
Yes, some really, really good work going on. Thank you, Helen. Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to just say thanks to all the team. There's been 2 recent prosecutions of builders in Bridgend Borough, and one of them was actually from my community. And I just wanted to say thanks so much for all the hard work, because these people shouldn't be allowed to get away with it.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. And I know the cases that you're alluding to there, some rogue builder cases, really good investigations, lots of work went into those. And yes, absolutely great to see the outcome. Thank you. I'll pass the thanks on.
Are there any other questions, friends? No, I think that's it. Thank you to everyone who presented. Some really great work going on. Really, really thorough presentations. Much appreciated.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. Can I just take you back to the recommendation for the report? So it comes in 3 parts. Firstly, to consider, note and agree the contents of the report, to approve the communicable disease plan and the Port Health plan for 23-24 that Christina took us through, and lastly, to authorise me to make any administrative amendments to those 2 plans during the course of the year should the need arise.
I'd like to move, please.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Pamela. Is that agreed by everyone? I think that's a yes. Thank you all very much. Moving on to the next agenda item, it's Food Law Enforcement Service Plan 23-24, and I believe Christina has some slides.
I do, yes. Thank you, Chair. I am going to call upon Jason, if I may, to share my presentation and drive that just while I'm speaking. And apologies in advance. I'm really aware that we are approaching the lunchtime slot, and there may be some photographs in this presentation that will put you all off your lunch, so apologies again. So in terms of the Food Law Enforcement Service Plan, this report and short presentation is really just to apprise you as Joint Committee of the work we do in respect of food and feed law. And the report requests the committee to approve the Food and Feed Law Enforcement Service Plan for the SRS for 23-24. It also, the other recommendation is to request that Helen is able to give administrative amendments should we need to throughout the year. So in terms of the plan, why do we do this, other than the fact that we do, enjoy talking about food? We have a statutory duty to produce a Food Law Enforcement Service Plan, or FLASP as we call it, each year. And the plan sets out how we discharge our duties and also details the resource we have available to undertake this work. It also sets out some challenges that we have as a service, but also some opportunities in delivering these functions. And it gives you, as Joint Committee, a flavour of our activity levels and the work which the teams undertake, as well as the performance indicators that we report to you each quarter. So if I could move the slides on, Jason. Lovely, thank you. So this slide is just to remind you how we achieve compliance and ensure the safety of the food chain. It could be, because of course we look at things from farm to fork, and inspections is really one part of the services work. We also respond to complaints. We look at requests for advice, conduct sampling. We offer training, as Jason alluded to, and of course, on the last resort is to carry out enforcement action where necessary. So moving on, so we talked about this previously, members, that you'll be aware that the SRS structure is incredibly lean, and there's significant shortfall of staff to deliver what are our statutory duties. You'll see from this slide, in order to deliver the full programme as per the Food Standards Agency Code of Practices, looking at interventions from category A to E, the service would need a further 6 full-time members of staff, and that is effectively another team to fully deliver what's expected of us. The added complication for us is, as you know, as I've previously reported, there currently remains a significant backlog. And you'll know this is attributed to the pandemic, where staff weren't able to inspect or were repurposed for the TTP programme. You know that we've previously followed the Food Standards Agency recovery plan and we made good progress, but there is still a lot of work to do in terms of really targeting that backlog. So moving on to the next slide, I've set out here, which is detailed in the plan, how we're going to achieve this in this financial year. And this really is sort of the minimum in terms of what we've agreed with the Food Standards Agency that we're going to do in terms of the inspection programme alone. So we've said that we will carry out 100% of our A-rated premises, and the same for our B-rated premises, our very high risk. In terms of category C, we will focus on those non-broadly compliant businesses as a starting point, so those with a hygiene rating of 0, 1 or 2. And currently we have moved on at doing an on-site inspection to those category C rated businesses with a rating of 3 and 4. We're currently on a score of 4. In terms of the category C premises with a rating of 5, we are not saying that we are going to be able to do all of those businesses. So we are saying that we will target those where we receive intelligence or we have complaints to demonstrate to us that the standards have fallen in those businesses. The FSA agrees that this is really a risk-based approach way of tackling the backlog, but it isn't the plan for delivering the service in the future. This is just in year whilst we try and resolve some of the issues that we have. So moving on to the next slide, Jason. Now, whilst our broadly compliant figures remain high, that's the number of businesses that we have scoring 3 or above, they are above the national average. On occasion, we do come across standards or practices where intervention are required. I think these 3 photographs sort of speak for themselves and give you a flavour of some of the bad things that we deal with. So starting with the photograph, it's also worth mentioning that the photographs are current and active cases ongoing in the region. So the first on the left being an active mice infestation with a lovely bit of food waste on the floor there for the mice to nibble on. The business was closed until the mice infestation was eradicated, and along with requirements of a deep clean and adequate pest proofing. This business was given a food hygiene rating of 0, but felt the need to go to the media and social media to report how harsh our officers had been in giving them a food hygiene rating of 0. That along the floor there is of course all mice droppings for you to be aware. So current active mice infestation in that premise. The middle photo is a very recent one, is a mobile food vendor in the area selling burgers, fish and chips, and sometimes really high risk things like mussels and lobster and crab. As a result of this inspection, they scored a food hygiene rating of 0. They also were served 2 remedial action notices. One of them was because their fridge just wasn't working. They knew it wasn't working and the food was being stored at 21 degrees C. And the second was stopping them from handling and storing raw meat due to the poor practices observed and no records on site. So you'll see that middle photograph there, raw meat being stored in the wash hand basin. So they clearly weren't washing their hands at that time either. Again, you know, that food was voluntary surrendered. So there was no risk to the public, but these practices were only came to light because we were undertaking a routine food hygiene inspection. We wouldn't have known that that was happening unless we were doing that visit at that time. The photograph on the right is a vehicle that was pulled over by the police on the M4. It's an unrefrigerated vehicle that was on its way to a premise in Cardiff. It contained numerous boxes of chilled and frozen food items, in excess of 50. The food items range from boxes of fish, turkey, and other meats. And the frozen and chilled meats were being transported, obviously in an unsatisfactory manner. The vehicle wasn't refrigerated in any way. The meat was beginning to show signs that it was thawing and really smelt quite badly. Officers responded quite quickly to the request, and the food was surrendered and taken out to the food chain as soon as possible. Again, I'm highlighting here that had that police officer not pulled over that van, we wouldn't have known that that was coming down the M4 and coming to a premises near us. So again, the ability to respond and undertake these inspections is really important to us in terms of eradicating risk to the food chain. So moving on to the next slide. I've highlighted this previously in terms of what happens when things go wrong. And this for us is the real risk of the duties that we undertake and what we do. So we talk in other areas of the service about being intelligence-led and complaint-led. But what we find in the area of food, whilst we do get complaints and we react to things, undertaking our inspection programme is really, really important for us to be sort of Bobby on the beat, if you like, in determining what's going on in the premises of our area. So having backlogs is a risk to us as a service, and we need to make sure that we do all that we can to get on top of that. So as well as, of course, having full teams currently, we're offering team members overtime to carry out more inspections if they're able to do so. And I've engaged with several contractors in the area, and we currently have 7 contractors on our books. All manner of arrangements in terms of the hours that they do and so on. But again, these are all efforts in terms of getting rid of that backlog. Now, that isn't the answer to us going forward. It's not a sustainable model. But we've talked previously about this being the year to try and get rid of that backlog as much as we can. Contractors are quite transient in nature. They're hard to come by, they're hard to keep. And so there's a constant challenge for us there in terms of keeping them in our employment and keeping the work going. But nevertheless, I'm pretty confident that given everything that we're throwing towards this backlog, we will obviously make strides and improvement in terms of the numbers that we have. But going back to the slide there that you have in front of you, far left is, of course, Mason Jones. I've talked to you about Mason Jones' case many times during Joint Committee. He died in 2005 after eating contaminated meat at a school. This was the very, very well-known E. coli outbreak. The infected meat which killed him came from a butcher's in Bridgend, and that supplied more than 40 other schools in the South Wales valleys. Around 160 people fell ill during that E. coli outbreak. When we get outbreaks of this nature, that completely takes out the team in terms of it's all hands on deck to establish the source and rectify issues. Whereas if we're picking these things up in advance of any issues, that is going to prevent things like this happening again. Far right, you've got a photograph there of a young girl, Megan Lee. Megan was 15 when she suffered a fatal allergic reaction to a meal that she ate, which contained peanuts. On post-mortem, that demonstrated that she died because of an acute asthma attack resulting from a nut allergy. So Megan knew that she had a nut allergy, and when she ordered her meal from a takeaway restaurant, she used the Just Eat platform, and on the order, she stipulated her allergy. Now, the meal itself, she asked for the meal not to include prawns or nuts. And as part of this really complex investigation, the meal was later found to have widespread presence of peanut protein. Now, that wasn't because peanut was in the ingredients. That was because the business had no systems or processes in place to manage that control of allergens. And the menu contained no information about allergens, or no record was being kept by the ingredients used in the dishes. Again, this was Lancashire Environmental Health and Trading Standards that did this investigation. Dealing with that, not only the really horrendous issue of somebody dying from an allergic reaction, that takes the team out for a considerable amount of time. And of course, terrible consequences of a really poor practices of a business. And again, this is our risk in terms of food that we really don't want to happen. The last photograph that I put up there is Natasha Edna Laperouse. Now, this is the Pret a Manger case, which was all over the media. And of course, what happened in this case was that Natasha had an allergy issue. She was 15. She died in 2016 after a severe allergic reaction to a Pret a Manger baguette that contains sesame. Now, interestingly, that company hadn't broken the law in that case, but there has been a regulation, a legislative change since that death, which means that sandwiches or items that are pre-packed for direct sale now must have a full list of ingredients for consumers to be able to determine whether they may have allergy-related issues with the foods that they're eating. So again, this presentation is not it's not a scaring session. This is really just to demonstrate to you all that whilst we talk to you about figures, we talk to you about performance, underneath it all, we have all of these type of cases in mind. And this is why we do what we do in terms of protecting public health and making sure that our food chain and the food businesses in our area are at the highest standard possible. So the Food Law Enforcement Service Plan, as I said, it sets out how we are going to deliver our programme for this financial year. I'm pleased that we are making strides, but equally I am also asking Joint Committee members to note that we don't have enough resource to meet the full requirements of our statutory duties, and to call upon you all to bear that in mind in any future budget discussions that we may have. So I'm going to stop and let room for any questions that any of you may have.
Thank you very much, Christina. Any questions, friends? Ruba.
Thank you, Christina. Christina, I mean, the last part of your presentation and those cases that you covered, I mean, it really brings it home to me, because I have a daughter. I mean, she's in her early 20s, but she has a nut allergy and carries an EpiPen and all the rest of it. But actually, she has to be constantly vigilant, because, you know, she's a student. So if she goes to a takeaway and all the rest of it, and they're saying, oh, no, there are no nuts, you know, she knows that she has to be more vigilant for that. But obviously, you know, you rely on the information you're given. So really, I suppose it's a comment that I'm making in terms of kind of the future, looking forward, and we've covered it a lot today in terms of resources and the fact that the work is not going to get less, it's going to increase, and we do need to, as a committee, you know, recognise, acknowledge that, and, you know, and go back to our local authorities, and also lobby both Welsh Government and national government in terms of, you know, where their priorities are, because if public health is a serious aspect of government, which it is, then it has to be resourced properly, because it's only by local authorities, if you like, not supervising, but inspecting, doing these inspections of small businesses, that we can provide, you know, safety for people using them. So hats off to all that you're doing, Christina. You know, and that's you know, it was a good report, but also, you know, must ensure that we're you know, not under any illusion that this is going to sort of necessarily get better. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ruba.
Councillor.
Councillor Drake.
Yes, as somebody who's got a severe allergy herself to shellfish and seafood, and I've had that for a very long time. I've actually had anaphylactic shock as well, but they actually managed to save me. And I just welcome all the work you're doing that, because I'm very, very wary. I've been for a number of years. When you actually go to a buffet, I'm very, very careful, especially when people are using different spoons, you know, but that's me. I'm just aware of it. But some of these young people, they don't realise those kind of things. But thank you for all your work you're doing.
Great stuff. Are there any other questions, colleagues? No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for your presentation, Christina. Very, very, very powerful. So we're being asked to approve the plan and delegate powers to Helen to amend. Is that agreed, colleagues? Yep. Wonderful. Great stuff. Thank you all. And on to our final item of the meeting, the review of the SRS compliance and enforcement policy. And I think that's back to you, Helen. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Chair, and hopefully this will be a relatively brief report. So it's just to advise members that the compliance and enforcement policy, it was first adopted by the three partner councils following approval by the Joint Committee back in 2016. Since that time, 3 more detailed annexes have been added to the overarching policy, and the reason for that is the fact that the 3 annexes, which are around food, feed and health and safety enforcement, they've got some quite characteristic enforcement options which are not applicable right across the full sphere of enforcement. So that is why there are 3 separate annexes. So the purpose of the compliance and enforcement policies is to set standards that would be applied when dealing with issues of non-compliance with public protection law, and what residents, consumers and businesses can expect from the shared service as a law enforcement agency. So since its adoption in 2016, the policy has been effective in ensuring a consistent enforcement approach that is appropriate to the circumstances, and it has enabled any legal challenges in respect of enforcement action to be mitigated. It sets out our approach, which is a stepped approach. So in the vast majority of cases, we will always seek to work with the business to lead them through the area of law to achieve compliance. But there comes a point where if a business doesn't take that offer of help, or they don't comply, then of course we will need to take that stepped enforcement action to move on to the next stage, which would include formal action, but potentially through the court. The policy also explains the interface between the service in investigating the matters through enforcement, that interface between the service and the 3 legal services for the 3 partner councils. So as I say, it came to Joint Committee for approval in 2016, and it was felt that while it's been monitored over the whole of that time, it was time for a review to make sure that it remained current and fit for purpose. So we've undertaken that review, and the feedback we've had from the barrister that assisted us with that is very positive, that he felt that the policy had been well constructed, and it had stood the test of time. However, there were certain things that now could be updated, and I've included some of those, just a reference to those in 2.1, where I mention it's much clearer now, the fact that we comply with the principles of the Victims Code, and we've included that in 8.3 of the overarching policy. We're also taking the opportunity to better reflect the full range of enforcement approaches and outcomes that are available to us. So an example being the revised policy, which members will find in Appendix 1. It gives a much more detailed narrative on financial investigations and the confiscation of assets under the Proceeds of Crime Act. In terms of the enforcement options available to us, 2.3 details 2 of those which weren't considered in any detail in the original policy that we've been working under since 2016. And one of those I know would be of interest to members, and this is the ability to seek a closure order under the Anti-Social Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act in respect of retail outlets selling illicit products such as counterfeit and non-duty paid tobacco. And this is an area of work where the service has engaged with the 3 legal services department to get agreement that that enforcement option will be taken forward, and we are actively looking at our first application for a closure order to support enforcement action. So that is a very brief run through of the purpose of the enforcement, compliance and enforcement policy and the recent review. More than happy to take any questions that there may be. Otherwise, I will take you back to the recommendation.
Thank you, Helen. Are there any questions, colleagues? No, I don't think so. If we can go to the recommendations, please, Helen.
Okay, thank you. So this again is a 3-parter. The first part is for Joint Committee to acknowledge the recent review of the Shared Regulatory Services Compliance and Enforcement Policy and approve use by SRS of the updated policy and accompanying annexes. Part 2 is to recommend the adoption of the revised policy by the respective councils for those functions undertaken by the shared service on their behalf, and that was a recommendation in the 2016 report. It reflects that. And the third part of the recommendation is to authorise me to make any minor administrative amendments and updates to the new version of the compliance and enforcement policy once implemented, should the need arise.
Thank you, Helen. Are the recommendations agreed? Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you all very much. That's brilliant. As there is no other business, can I say a big thank you to the officers who are doing some great work in very difficult circumstances. Lovely to see you, councillor colleagues. All the best, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Chair.